Somewhere in the south of this country, there's a barrel holding 10 tons of fish. Nobody touches it for a year. Not to stir it, not to taste it, nothing. But that barrel is the reason almost every dish in this video tastes the way it does. 200 kilometers north of it, a pot of bones has been surrendering itself into broth since midnight, 6 hours before anyone in the city wakes up to drink it. A market that once floated 500 boats now floats 200, and nobody voted for that to happen. A grandmother's recipe. A boy sent away at 14 to learn a trade with his hands. 4 generations, and only one of them still remembers how it's done, and she has not yet decided who gets to learn it next. This is Vietnam, the country that cannot agree with itself about how to cook its own food. Same rice, same fish, same fire, and 1,000 unrelated conclusions about what to do with them. Stay till the end, because that barrel isn't just where this story starts. It's the one ingredient hiding inside almost everything you're about to watch. 4 in the morning, and the street is already on fire. Not with flame, but with steam. A blue plastic stool. A single gas burner. A pot wide enough to hold a human torso, filled with bones that have been boiling since midnight. The steam rises off it in a column thick enough to fog a passing motorbike's headlight, and it does this every single morning, in the same spot, for as long as anyone in the neighborhood can remember. This is pho, and Hanoi did not invent it so much as extract it. Beef bones, charred ginger, toasted star anise, and 8 hours of patience, boiled down until the broth carries weight it shouldn't be able to carry. Put a spoonful in the refrigerator overnight, and it sets into a jelly the texture of a soft eraser. That is not a mistake. That is collagen giving up, one long protein chain at a time, until there's nothing left rigid enough to hold its shape. Comment your guess right now. Why does bone turn into something that jiggles like that overnight? Hold on to your answer. The real one is coming later in this video, and it changes how you'll see almost every other dish on this list. Scale it out, and the arithmetic gets uncomfortable. A single stall like this one sells through 80 kilograms of bone a week, the raw skeleton of roughly 4 adult cattle, reduced down to a liquid clear enough to see the bottom of the bowl through. The city was still ruled from Hue when versions of this soup first appeared on Hanoi's streets, and the French had not yet finished building their railway north, before the recipe had already split into 2 rival camps that still refused to agree with each other. One frayed detail and the whole bowl collapses. Too little bone and the broth turns thin and apologetic. Too much simmer and it turns bitter. Too little char on the ginger, and the whole thing tastes like nothing at all. There is no recipe card taped to the wall. There is only 40 years of a woman's wrist knowing when the broth is ready by smell alone, a kind of knowledge that has never once been written down because it was never meant to travel outside the family that owns it. Southerners add sugar to their version, and Northerners consider this an insult worth arguing about at length, sometimes for the length of an entire meal. Both sides are certain they are the ones preserving the original, and neither has ever produced a single document that settles the argument. One country, one soup, and 2 sides that have never once agreed on how it should taste. Where pho survives on patience, the next dish survives on fire that refuses to stop moving. Bún chả starts with charcoal, not a burner, a clay pot filled with coals, glowing under a wire grate stacked with pork patties and pork belly cut thin enough to blister in under a minute. The smoke does not politely rise and disappear. It hangs at eye level down entire alleys in Hanoi's old quarter, thick enough that regulars claim they can find a good bún chả stall with their eyes closed, just by walking into the haze and letting their nose do the navigating. The mechanism is simple and unforgiving. Fat drips onto open coal. The coal answers back with more smoke, and that smoke is the entire point. It is what separates a grilled patty from a merely cooked one. Pull the meat 1 minute too late, and 40 years of a family's reputation goes up in the same smoke that built it. Pull it 1 minute too early, and the fat never fully renders, leaving a patty that tastes like an apology. President Barack Obama once sat on a plastic stool and ate this dish with chopsticks in front of television cameras. And the stall's business tripled within a week and never fully came back down to where it started. No fork, no menu. Just smoke, char, and a fish sauce dipping broth strong enough to clear a stranger's sinuses on contact. But not every fire in this country burns for meat. Halfway down the coast, in Hoi An, the fire burns for water instead. Sao Lo depends on noodles the color of raw wood, chewy in a way no other Vietnamese noodle manages, and the recipe insists, without room for negotiation, that the water come from one specific well, dug centuries ago, inside the old town itself. Cooks who have tried substituting tap water report a noodle that simply refuses to behave the same way, going soft where it should hold, and holding where it should give. Nobody has ever fully explained why. The old town's Cham-era engineers dug wells whose mineral chemistry apparently cannot be replicated 3 streets over, and generations of noodle makers have simply accepted this the way people accept weather. Ash from one specific local tree goes into the soaking water, and a precise length of soak turns rice flour into something closer to wheat noodle than anything else in the country's kitchen. The result is a dish that, by an accident of geology, cannot be correctly reproduced anywhere else on the planet. Not one province over, not one street over. Keep moving south, and the fire only gets more aggressive. Ban Sio, the sizzling pancake, is named for the sound it makes the instant rice batter meets a wok already screaming with oil. Turmeric turns the batter the color of an egg yolk. Shrimp, pork, and bean sprouts go in, while the oil is still spitting hard enough to leave small burns on an inattentive cook's forearm. And the batter has to hit that oil at exactly the right temperature, or the signature crackle never forms at all. The pan never comes off the heat, not even for a second, or the pancake collapses into something soft and unremarkable. Cooks in Mekong Delta villages stand directly over open flame for 6, 8, sometimes 10 hours a day frying these one at a time, and the small scars on their forearms are simply considered part of the job description, the same way a boxer accepts scar tissue over the eyebrow. Further south still, in the Mekong Delta itself, the cooking migrates from fire to water. Hutio Nam Vang builds its broth from pork bone and dried squid, a combination borrowed from Cambodian and Chinese kitchens that settled here generations ago and never left. The broth simmers for hours over low heat inside floating kitchens that rock gently with the current of the canal running beneath the floorboards. One wrong ratio of squid to bone, and the broth turns cloying instead of complex, and there is no room to correct course once the pot has already reduced past the point of adding more water. The cook either got the proportion right at the start, or the whole batch is quietly sold at a discount by noon. And in Hue, the old imperial capital, spice stops being a flavor and becomes an entire philosophy. Bun Bo Hue carries a chili oil sharp enough to make a first-time visitor's eyes water within seconds. Built on a broth of lemongrass, fermented shrimp paste, and beef bone simmered together until the color turns a shade of rust. No other regional broth in the country ever reaches. Royal court cooks once designed dishes purely to test a chef's patience under the old emperors, rewarding precision and punishing haste in equal measure. And the descendants of those recipes still punish shortcuts today. A broth rushed by even 20 minutes tastes noticeably thinner, and regulars notice within the first spoonful, sending the bowl back without needing to explain why. Here's what almost nobody explains about that jelly a good pho broth turns into overnight. Bone contains collagen, a coiled protein that starts unwinding once broth passes roughly 60 degrees Celsius. Hold it there for hours, and the collagen hydrolyzes into gelatin, the same water-soluble protein that gives cooled broth its wobble. It is the identical transformation used to manufacture pharmaceutical gelatin capsules, the ones that dissolve quietly in a stomach 20 minutes after swallowing, which is why a broth simmered 8 hours sets into a firm jelly by morning, while one rushed in 90 minutes stays thin no matter how much salt gets thrown at it. But knowledge like this only matters if someone is willing to stand over the pot for 8 hours straight. And 200 kilometers south, someone already has been, since before the sun came up. Not every ritual in this country runs on heat and urgency. In a narrow Hanoi alley, a man in his 70s pours hot water over a spoonful of egg yolk and sugar, whisked into a foam the color of caramel, and lets it settle over a shot of dark coffee. Café chung, egg coffee, takes minutes, not hours, and asks for nothing but a steady hand and patience with the whisk. The story goes that the recipe was born out of a milk shortage decades ago, when a hotel bartender needed something to replace cream and reached for whipped egg instead, more out of necessity than inspiration. Whatever the truth of its origin, the ritual has not changed since. Whisk, pour, wait, and drink it slowly, because it cools from the top down and rewards patience the same way pho does. Down south, the same unhurried logic plays out over ice instead of foam. Café soda, dark roast coffee dripped one slow drop at a time through a small metal filter, then stirred into sweetened condensed milk over ice. Takes 10 unbothered minutes from filter to glass, and nobody drinking it seems to be in any hurry to change that. There is no fire here, no blistering oil, no smoke hanging at eye level. Just the quiet tick of a metal filter dripping coffee one drop at a time into a glass. In a country that otherwise seems to be cooking against the clock in every other direction. As if this one ritual was deliberately built to slow everyone down for 10 minutes a day. But even this slower corner of the food world is shrinking. Fewer young Hanoians know how to whisk the foam by hand anymore, and the number of cafes still making it the old way keeps getting smaller every year, replaced by machines that can pull the same foam in under a minute without anyone needing to learn the wrist motion at all. Behind every one of these dishes is a person whose entire day is built around it, and rarely a comfortable one. Before dawn breaks over Hanoi, women balance bamboo poles across their shoulders, a woven basket swinging from each end, one loaded with sticky rice, the other with the charcoal stove used to keep it warm. Soy sellers walk these routes on foot for 6, sometimes 8 hours a day, covering distances that would exhaust a casual jogger, carrying a combined weight that regularly tops 25 kilograms, roughly the weight of a fully grown German shepherd, balanced on a single strip of bamboo across one shoulder, shifting from side to side every few hundred meters, to spare whichever shoulder is bruising that week. Their day started at 2 in the morning, soaking rice by lamplight, and it will not end until the last basket is empty, however many hours that takes. Tourists call it a memorable photograph, framed against the morning light coming off the lake. These women call it Tuesday, and they will do it again tomorrow whether or not anyone photographs them doing it, and again the day after that, for as many years as their knees will allow. Ban kuon, steamed rice flour rolls, filled with minced pork and wood ear mushroom, demands a specific kind of stamina that has nothing to do with strength. A cook ladles batter onto a stretched cloth over boiling water, waits exactly long enough for it to turn translucent, then peels the sheet off in one motion, using nothing but a thin bamboo stick. Rush it and the sheet tears. Wait 1 second too long and it welds itself to the cloth. Vendors repeat this same 4-second motion for up to 1,000 rolls in a single morning, and their fingers know the timing long before their eyes do, reading heat and moisture the way a pianist reads a keyboard without looking down at it, hands moving on a kind of muscle memory no classroom could teach in less than several years. South of the capital, fish sauce cannot exist without labor most customers will never see or think about. On Phú Quốc Island, workers haul baskets of anchovies weighing 40 kilograms apiece into wooden barrels the height of a person, then pack in coarse salt by hand, layer after layer, until the barrel is full. The smell alone drives most first-time visitors back out the door within a minute. The workers who do this for a living stopped noticing the smell years ago, the same way a fisherman stops noticing the smell of his own boat. A liter of the finished sauce sells in a supermarket for less than the price of a single restaurant meal in the same town. Tourists pay a premium for a bottle labeled artisanal and rarely learn that the margin on it barely covers the salt, let alone the year the barrel spent quietly fermenting, untouched, while its owner waited for a return on an investment made 12 months earlier, with no guarantee it would pay off at all. Many of these families have never worked another trade, and most could not describe what they would do instead if the barrels stopped selling. In the Mekong Delta, ice is its own supply chain, and one most tourists never think about at all. Blocks the size of a coffin are cut, hauled and delivered by boat before sunrise to keep chai and iced coffee cold through the heat of the day. Delivery men handle blocks weighing upward of 50 kilograms with nothing but a metal hook and bare forearms, working a route that has to finish before the ice itself finishes melting, racing a clock that has no sympathy for traffic or a flat tire. Tourists pay $1 for a glass of iced coffee and rarely wonder how the ice got there before they did. The delivery boat that brought it left the dock at 4 in the morning, and it will make the same run again tomorrow, and the day after that, in weather that does not care whether the deliverymen slept. And in Ho Chi Minh City, an entirely different kind of labor keeps the city's night markets moving. Cart vendors who push their entire kitchen, wheels and all, from block to block, adjusting to whichever street has the heaviest foot traffic that particular hour. A single cart can weigh over 100 kilograms once loaded with propane, ingredients, and equipment, pushed uphill over broken pavement by one person, night after night, for years, until the body simply learns to compensate for the strain the way it learns anything else repeated 10,000 times. Their entire storefront, kitchen, and inventory has to be mobile enough to disappear within 90 seconds if a police patrol turns onto the wrong street. A fact of life so routine that most vendors can fold a cart shut and vanish around a corner without breaking conversation with a customer mid-sentence. Tourists photograph the carts as a symbol of the city's energy. The vendors pushing them mostly just want to make it home before their legs give out for the night. Nothing in this country tests the body quite like a fish sauce barrel. The vats stand taller than a person. Some hold over 10 tons of fish and salt. Workers climb narrow wooden ladders to check the fermentation. One wrong step means a fall into liquid that has been breaking down protein for months. The smell alone has driven first-time visitors to their knees. It is not spoiled. It is working exactly as intended. Ammonia, salt, and slowly dissolving fish tissue, compressed into a single vapor with nowhere to go. 12 months, sometimes 18. That is how long the best barrels sit sealed, untouched, doing nothing that looks like cooking at all. No stirring, no tasting. Just time, salt, and enzymes, doing work no human hand could speed up, no matter how skilled that hand is. One barrel improperly sealed can spoil an entire batch worth a season's income. There is no insurance policy for a bad ferment. There is only the barrel, And whether it was packed correctly 18 months ago by someone who is no longer around to fix the mistake, whether they moved away, retired, or simply aged out of the trade. The air inside a fermentation house can be thick enough to sting unprotected eyes within seconds. Workers wear cloth over their faces and keep moving anyway, because the alternative is no income at all, and a family that has made sauce for 3 generations rarely knows another trade to fall back on. A liter of the first pressing, the sauce drawn straight from the bottom of the barrel, undiluted and unadulterated, can carry a price several times higher than the everyday bottle on a supermarket shelf. Most of what gets exported never touches that grade at all, mixed down instead into something cheaper and far less concentrated. This is the extraction point of Vietnamese cuisine, the ingredient nearly every other dish in this script depends on, made under conditions almost none of those dishes diners will ever witness, let alone climb a ladder to see for themselves. Wrapped in a smell most of them would never willingly stand near for more than a minute. The barrel does not care whether anyone is watching. Not every entry in this country's food story is built on danger. Some are built on things that simply should not work and do anyway. It looks like a coconut. It isn't, not anymore. Duong zua, coconut worms, are the larvae that grow inside the trunk of a dying palm tree, harvested by splitting the trunk open and pulling the worms out live, sometimes eaten still moving, sometimes fried until crisp. Farmers describe the taste as something close to coconut cream, concentrated into something with a pulse, and the dish carries a price tag well above ordinary street food, reserved for occasions and curious visitors, rather than an everyday lunch. Nobody outside the region has ever fully explained why farmers deliberately kill a healthy palm tree just to farm the pest that would otherwise have killed it slowly on its own. The tree that hosts the worms was always going to die. The only question the farmer answers is how it gets used on the way down. It looks like an egg. Functionally, that's exactly what it is, until the shell comes off. Trung vịt lộn is a fertilized duck egg, boiled somewhere between 17 and 21 days into development, served with a partially formed duckling still inside, eaten with a spoon straight from the shell, alongside a pinch of pepper and a sprig of herb. First-timers are told to eat it in darkness, so the shape doesn't register before the taste does, and most manage exactly 1 bite before deciding whether there will be a second. Street vendors sell these by the cartload late into the night, precisely timed. An egg boiled at 16 days tastes different from one boiled at 20, and regulars can tell the difference on the first spoonful, ordering their preferred age the way a coffee drinker orders a specific roast. It looks like a tree growing sideways out of a river. It's actually a sales pitch. Cây bao, the tall bamboo poles used at Mekong Delta floating markets, hang a single sample of whatever a boat is selling high enough to be seen from 100 meters away. 1 pineapple means a boatload of pineapples. 1 pumpkin means the same. No shouting required. No signage. Just a single vegetable, nailed to a pole, doing the work of an entire storefront from 100 meters out. Why this particular signaling system, and not some other, nobody has ever bothered to record. It simply appeared, generations ago, somewhere along these canals, and every vendor since has followed the same unwritten rule without needing it explained twice. 1 pole, empty at the top, means the boat itself is for sale, a fact every buyer on the river seems to already know without ever being taught it directly. It looks unremarkable, dark, salty, faintly sweet. It's actually the product of a decomposition process most Western food safety regulators would refuse to certify on paper. The Mekong Delta's family of pungent fermented fish pastes sits for weeks or months in earthenware jars, breaking down under its own enzymes into something that smells aggressive and tastes, against every expectation, balanced. Grandmothers passed down the exact jar, sometimes decades old, that seeded the current batch, the way a sourdough starter gets passed hand to hand, each new batch quietly inheriting the microbial signature of every batch that came before it. No factory has managed to replicate the flavor of a jar that has been feeding itself for 30 years, and the families who own one treat it less like a condiment and more like a modest, ongoing inheritance, one that cannot be bought back once it's gone, no matter how much a buyer offers for it. It looks like an ordinary sticky rice cake, wrapped in banana leaf. It's actually a calendar. Bánh Chưng and its southern cousin Bánh Tét only appear once a year, around Lunar New Year, and every household that makes one insists their particular fold, their particular ratio of pork fat to mung bean, is the correct version, and every other household's is a well-meaning mistake. Families gather to wrap and boil dozens of them overnight, taking turns feeding a fire that cannot be left unattended for 10 hours straight, turning an act of cooking into something closer to a vigil. Is there an original recipe, and if so, whose kitchen is it in? Nobody has ever definitively said, and every family with a grandmother still living seems entirely comfortable with there never being an answer. But not every dish in this script survives contact with the modern city. Some slowly lose the argument. The erosion starts quietly, in Hanoi's Old Quarter, where narrow storefronts that once housed a single family's noodle stall for 3 generations are being bought out one by one and converted into coffee chains and phone shops. Rent has climbed faster than a street vendor's daily earnings ever could, and landlords increasingly prefer a fixed monthly lease from a chain over the unpredictable cash flow of a family stall. Sons and daughters who might once have inherited a family recipe are choosing office jobs instead, with fixed hours and air conditioning, and nobody who has stood over a charcoal grill at 4 in the morning can really blame them for it. The recipe does not disappear all at once, in a single dramatic afternoon. It simply has no one left standing over the pot the next morning, and then the morning after that, until the storefront belongs to someone else entirely. Further south, on Phú Quốc, the traditional fermentation houses face a slower kind of abandonment. Industrial factories using stainless steel tanks and accelerated fermentation methods can produce sauce in weeks instead of a year, at a fraction of the cost, and supermarket shelves increasingly stock the faster version instead of the slow one. The wooden barrels that take 12 months to do their work sit half empty in houses whose owners are aging out of the trade, with fewer and fewer of their children willing to spend a full year of their working life waiting on a single batch that might not even sell for a premium once it's finally ready. Some fermentation houses that once ran 40 barrels at a time now run a handful, kept going mostly out of habit and a reluctance to let a family trade end on their own watch. A handful of exporters still pay a premium for the slow batches, which is the only reason any of the old barrels are still standing at all. And then the vanishing that happened almost overnight, with no gradual runway at all. When the country's cities shut down for months during the pandemic, tens of thousands of street stalls, carts, plastic stool restaurants, single-family noodle shops, closed their shutters and simply never reopened. Some owners were too old to start over from nothing, at an age when most people are winding down instead of rebuilding. Some had spent every last bit of savings just surviving the closure itself, with nothing left over to restock a kitchen. A recipe that had survived war, famine, and decades of political upheaval could not survive 18 months without a single paying customer walking past the door, and no government relief program was built with a single noodle cart in mind. A handful of vendors stayed anyway, propping open their shutters on streets, with no foot traffic at all, refusing to let the pot go cold, even when nobody was buying anything from it. Their refusal was not a business decision, and it never pretended to be one. It was the only version of the recipe they knew how to keep alive, even at a loss, even when every number on the ledger said to stop. For most of the last century, the danger to Vietnam's floating markets was never a storm or a flood. It stayed quiet, waiting somewhere in a government planning office. Cái Răng and Nga Bai, in the Mekong Delta, were once among the loudest wholesale hubs in the country. Boats stacked with pineapple, watermelon, and rice, converging from before sunrise to sell in bulk to smaller traders who paddled the goods further inland. In one of them, boat traffic once peaked above 500 vessels a day. The collapse did not take centuries. It took roughly 2 decades. New roads and bridges made trucks cheaper and faster than boats. Flood control embankments went up along the riverbanks to stop erosion, and in solving that problem they removed the piers vendors needed to dock and unload. Then the pandemic arrived, and traders who stopped working the river during lockdowns simply never came back to it. Commercial boat traffic that once topped 500 a day now numbers under 200. What's left behind is not a ruin so much as a stage missing most of its actors. The bamboo poles still stand, hung with a single sample fruit each, advertising boats that no longer show up in the numbers they once did. A few mother boats still anchor at dawn, mostly for the cameras of tourists who arrive by the busload to photograph a version of the market that peaked before most of them were born, unaware they are photographing the tail end of something rather than the thing itself. Local officials have named Cái Răng an officially protected cultural site and built a management board to protect what remains of it. The paperwork exists, the paddlers do not, in the numbers the paperwork implies. And yet something continues here, just not the thing anyone expected to survive. A smaller number of families still paddle out every morning, selling less than they used to fewer buyers than they used to have, some of them locals, most of them now visitors with cameras instead of shopping lists. The market didn't disappear. It just stopped being about food and started being about memory instead, kept alive now as much by nostalgia as by anyone's actual need for a boatload of pineapples. A market that held 500 boats a day can shrink to 200 without anyone agreeing to let it happen. That's how quietly this stuff disappears. Subscribe now, because the next dish this channel goes looking for might already be down to its last few families still willing to make it the slow way, and you'll want to already be here when that story gets told. A pot that has simmered since midnight. A barrel sealed for a year with no one watching. A pole holding up a single pineapple where 500 boats used to gather at dawn. None of it was designed by a single chef, a single government, or a single decade. It was built the way a river builds a delta, one small deposit at a time, from 1,000 kitchens that never once consulted each other, spread across a country shaped like a single spine, with 2 very different appetites hanging off either end of it. Every regional argument in this script, sweet against savory, north against south, tradition against convenience, is really the same argument the country has been having with itself since long before anyone thought to film it, and it shows no sign of resolving itself anytime soon. One country, a million recipes, and every one of them still cooking. For now. Somewhere right now, a pot is still simmering, a barrel is still sealed, and a pole is still holding up a single piece of fruit for a boat that might not show up today. That's not just a story about a country. It's a reminder that whatever's on your own plate tonight has a version of that same argument buried in it, whether you've ever thought about it or not. If this made you look at food differently, like this video, so more of these get made before the recipes it's built on disappear. Subscribe so you're already here for the next one. And send this to the one person you know who'd actually read the label on a bottle of fish sauce before pouring it. One country, a million recipes. And one more person now paying attention to which ones are still cooking.